Mother spent the better part of a week telling everyone on her street that I was coming home to look after her. She had a chore chart laminated before I'd even gotten my coat off. I didn't argue with her about it. I drove back into the city, called my agent that same night, and put my house on the market. My parents found out the way the rest of the neighbourhood did when the sign went up on the front lawn. That's the part that still makes me laugh. Before I get into it though, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments, I read them. And if you've ever had a parent try to rewrite your life without asking you, stick around to the end because this one pays off. So, the Sunday it all came apart, I was running on nothing. I just shipped the biggest project of my career, a full redesign of a mobile banking app for one of the big 5 banks, and the last stretch had been brutal. 6 weeks of late nights, 3 time zones, and far too much truck stop coffee from the O1 route on the way to the office. I want to be clear about something because I've thought about it a lot since. I'm not proud of how hard I ran myself into the ground. I used to think exhaustion was a kind of proof that you mattered. It isn't. It just makes you easier to push around, and my mother had been waiting a long time for a moment when I'd be easy to push. I was 31. I owned a narrow Victorian semi in Riverdale, the kind with the original trim and a furnace that I'd finally replaced the winter before. I had a good job, money in the bank, a life I'd built brick by brick. And still, the second I pulled into my parents' driveway in Burlington that afternoon, I felt about 14 years old. The house sat there the way it always did, beige brick, not a leaf out of place. The hedges trimmed so square they looked angry. My mother kept that property the way other people keep a grudge. The curtain in the front window twitched before I'd even cut the engine. I sat in the car a minute, both hands on the wheel, and I told myself I was being dramatic. I just wanted a roast and a couple of hours where nobody needed anything from me. I went up the walk, and the door opened before I touched it. "She's here," my mother said. Not to me. To the empty front hall behind her, like she was announcing a guest on a stage. She had her hair done and she was wearing a blazer, which she never wore on a Sunday, and her smile was the tight, rehearsed one she used for the camera at church functions. "You're late. We've got a schedule to keep." "Hi, Mum," I said. My voice came out like sandpaper. "Sorry, the QEW was a parking lot." "Well, you'll want to leave earlier from now on," she said, and shut the door behind me with a little click that I felt to my teeth. "Though I suppose you won't be making that drive much longer." I had one boot half off. What does that mean? She'd already turned around. "Dinner's getting cold. Your father's waiting. We've got a lot to go over before the movers come." Movers. My brain was so foggy it just slid right off the word. I followed her into the dining room and the smell of chicken, which should have felt like home, turned my stomach. My dad was at the head of the table, sitting very still, the way a man sits when he's hoping nobody asks him anything. He gave me a small, apologetic look and went back to his plate. He spent 40 years married to my mother by becoming furniture whenever she walked into a room. There was a clipboard on my placemat, not cutlery, a clipboard with a laminated page clipped to the front. Across the top, in my mother's careful printing, daily responsibilities, draft 1. "Mum, what is this?" "I told Mrs. Whitford yesterday," she said, pouring herself an iced tea, perfectly steady. "She's been asking after you, about your troubles in the city. I told her the good news that you finally come to your senses, you're giving up that rental, and you're moving home to help us. It's the sensible thing. We get a hand around the house, you save your money, and get back on your feet." My troubles, my rental, I felt the blood drop out of my face. "Eat your potatoes," she said, cutting her chicken into precise little squares. "We'll talk about fixing up the basement once you've signed." I want you to understand. This wasn't a misunderstanding I could clear up by explaining myself. She had built an entire story, sold it down the street, and slotted me into it like a piece of furniture, all while I'd been too busy working to notice. She hadn't asked. She'd decided. And the worst part was the look on her face, completely calm because she truly believed I had no other option. I looked down at the page. The words swam, but a few jumped out. 6 GREM. Prepare your father's low-sodium breakfast. 8 GREM to 10 deep clean. Main floor, baseboards included. Noon, drive your mother to her club. 9 p.m. Lights out. There was a column for her to initial each day. This is a joke, I said. I looked at my dad. You're in on this. He cleared his throat. He looked at the centerpiece, not at me. Well, your mother feels, with her hip and my pressure, the house is getting to be a lot, and we'd heard things were tight for you. Tight, I repeated. I just led a 7-figure project. I got promoted in the spring. Who told you things were tight? Oh, don't be ridiculous, my mother snapped, and her fork hit the plate. We know you're renting some shoebox downtown. We know there's no husband to help carry things. Mrs. Whitford saw your car parked at the No Frills on Gerrard 3 weeks ago. There's no shame in admitting you've failed, dear. The shame is in lying to your own parents about it. I shop at No Frills because I'm careful with money, not because I'm broke. I put the clipboard down. And I don't rent. I bought my house 3 years ago. You were there. You drank wine on my front porch. A bank owns the house, she said, waving her hand like she was clearing smoke, and the payments are clearly eating you alive. Why else would you still be single at 31? Look at you. You look terrible. You need us. I've already cleared out the basement. We brought your old bed down. It's cozy. You won't need much room. You'll be busy. I'd love to tell you that I sat with my feelings and processed them. What actually happened is that something in me went very quiet and very cold. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't tired at all. I'm not moving in here, I said. I'm not your housekeeper, and I'm not your nurse. She leaned in, and her voice dropped into the register that used to make me cry as a kid. The whole street is expecting you Tuesday. I told the Residents' Association you'd be taking over the forfare on my behalf since I'm so frail now. Don't you dare embarrass me. You'll give notice on that apartment tomorrow, and you'll come home where you belong. We raised you. You owe us this. There it was. We raised you. You owe us. I'd spend my whole life shrinking under that sentence. And right then, sitting in that dining room with gravy congealing on the good china, I finally heard it for what it was. Raising me wasn't a loan. I never signed anything. I didn't ask to be born so I could be cashed in at 31. No, I said, just that. She blinked. Excuse me. You didn't raise me so I'd owe you a salary and chores. That's not how it works. I don't owe you my life, and I don't owe you an explanation for mine. I stood up, and my chair scraped loud against the floor. I'm going home. If you walk out that door, she said, her voice climbing, the church polish gone. Don't expect us to be here when you come crawling back. You're selfish. You're ungrateful. You'll lose that apartment and end up on the street, and I will not lift one finger. I grabbed my purse. My hands were shaking, but not the way they used to. Good night, Mum. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, which felt like more of a statement, and walked to my car in the cold and sat there for a minute just breathing. My phone buzzed, a text from her already. You have until tomorrow morning to apologize and confirm the movers, or I'll tell everyone exactly what kind of daughter you are. I read it twice. She thought her little kingdom of bridge ladies and church committees was a court of law. She thought gossip was a weapon that could actually hurt me. She thought she held every card, because she'd convinced herself I was broke and desperate and out of options. Here's what she'd forgotten. I owned a 4-bedroom Victorian in one of the most sought-after neighbourhoods in the city, in a market that had gone completely feral. My place had gone up close to a third in the 2 years since I'd bought it. I didn't need her basement. I didn't need her safety net. I had a parachute, and it was made of money I'd earned myself. To explain why that dinner landed the way it did, I have to tell you about the 10 years before it. I wasn't a rebel. I was the fixer. When my brother got smart and moved out to Calgary, I was the one who showed up every Sunday to fill the silence. When my dad had his knee done, I took 2 weeks off and drove him to physio every morning and cooked their meals and listened to my mother complain that my soup wasn't salty enough. I spent my entire 20s trying to buy her approval with service. I thought if I was successful enough, helpful enough, present enough, one day she'd just look at me and say, "Well done." But my mother never traded in approval. She traded in control. To her, your children were extensions of her own reputation. If you did well, that was her parenting. If you struggled, that was a personal insult. And there was a sweet spot she loved best, where you needed her, but not so much that you embarrassed her. She wanted us dependent. She was 66 and told everyone she was 60. She hadn't cleaned her own house in 20 years, just churned through cleaners and fired each one after a month. She chaired the Residents' Association and reported neighbours to bylaw for letting their grass get a centimetre too long. And lately the ailments had started showing up exactly when there was work to do. Her hip flared up the second the dishwasher needed emptying. Her vertigo struck when the garden needed weeding. But she could play 3 sets of tennis on a Tuesday and dance at a wedding until midnight. The frailty only came out on cue. This caretaker plan was her masterpiece, and as I drove back over the Skyway, I realized it hadn't been sudden at all. The hints about the big house being too much, the little questions about my finances dressed up as worry, "Can you really afford that mortgage, dear?" She'd been laying the rails for months, waiting for me to look tired enough to be talked into it. And by telling the neighbours first, she boxed me in. If I refused, I wasn't an adult with a life. I was the cruel daughter who'd abandoned her sick parents. She'd turned her whole social circle into a fence around me. I pulled into a Tim Hortons lot off the highway because I needed to stop shaking before I could plan. Another text came in. "Mrs. Whitford has brought over a casserole for your welcome home supper. I told her you'd just stepped out for an errand. Don't make a liar of me." She was doubling down. She was quite literally betting the house on me folding. I scrolled my contacts to the one name that mattered. Orvette Lapointe was the best agent I knew. A tiny, ferocious woman in a beautiful coat who could sell a leaking duplex to a skeptic and have them thanking her. She'd helped me buy my place 3 years before. It was Sunday evening, but the good ones never really clock out. "Tell me you're finally ready to list," she said when she picked up. "The market is out of its mind right now." I watched the sun go down behind the gas pumps. "I want to sell," I said, and my voice came out steady for the first time all day. "Not as an investment, my house. The Riverdale place." A pause. "Your home? Honey, you love that house. You just did the kitchen." "I know." A tear finally slipped out, which annoyed me. "But I need to move. Far, fast." "How far?" "London," I said. The idea had been sitting in the back of my mind for the better part of a year. My company had a UK office that had been begging me to take a senior research role leading their European team. And I'd kept saying no because I'd been too scared to be that far from my parents in case they needed me. The joke being that they'd never once needed me for anything but cheap labour. "I want it listed this week. I want the sign in the yard fast. And Yvette, price it so we get a bidding war." She laughed low and pleased. "Now you're speaking my language." Monday morning, I woke up in my own bed to the sound of nothing, and it was the best sound I'd heard in months. My phone had been on silent since I left the driveway. I picked it up and scrolled through 50-something notifications the way you'd read a case study detached. 40 missed calls from Mum, a few from Dad, dozens of texts that marched from helpful, "I've bought the special detergent for your sheets," to martyred, "Your father is crying, I hope you're satisfied," to a 6 a.m. One that read, "I'm coming over at 9 to help you pack, you're clearly overwhelmed." "No," I said out loud to my empty bedroom, "you're not." I didn't reply. I opened my laptop and called the one person who could actually move my life forward. My manager's face filled the screen, surprised to see me a couple of hours early. "You okay?" he said. "You look like you slept about 3 hours. I thought you were taking a personal day." I am. But I need to ask you something first. That London role, the one you've been trying to fill for 3 months, is it still open? He sat up. You said you couldn't take it. Family stuff. My family stuff changed, I said. Is it mine if I want it? He didn't even hesitate. It's yours. There's a 2-year commitment on the relocation package. It's a big move. I can be on a plane in 3 weeks. Just send me the paperwork. He studied me for a second through the screen, and I think he saw something he decided not to ask about. I'll have HR send the offer by end of day, he said. Welcome to London. I shut the laptop and breathed out so long it felt like my whole chest emptied. I'd pulled the cord. But leaving my mother wasn't only about geography, it was about money and about proof. As long as she believed I was drowning, she had power over me. If I left without closing that loop, she'd spend the next decade telling the neighbours I'd fled the country to dodge my creditors. I needed it on the record. I needed to liquidate. Loudly. Yvette came by at 10 in a silver SUV and a camel coat, eyeing my front garden with approval. She walked through the house, taking in the restored trim and the kitchen I'd just finished, doing the math out loud. When you called, I figured you were having some kind of crisis, she said. But I pulled comps this morning and you're going to do very well. Inventory in this pocket is basically 0. I don't need top dollar if it means 3 months on the market, I said. I want it moving fast. List Thursday, open house Sunday, offers by Monday night. She nodded, then paused, pen over her tablet. Does your mother know? Because of course she knew my mother. Half the city did. My mother had once tried to get a woman bounced from the garden club for bringing store-bought squares to a fundraiser. She thinks I rent, I said. She thinks I'm broke. She thinks I'm moving into her basement to be her maid. Yvette's eyebrows went up into a hairline. I told her the whole thing. By the end, the professional realtor had been replaced by a co-conspirator with a slow, sharp smile. So we keep the signage discreet, she said. No. A dark little spark of satisfaction went off in my chest. Put up the biggest sign you've got, front and centre. Let her see it. Let her think my landlord's evicting me. It'll only make her more sure of herself. And when she calls you, and she will, tell her nothing until the ink is dry. The sign went up Wednesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, the enemy was at my door. I was in my front room wrapping books when the pounding started. Not a knock, a demand. I checked my phone camera. My mother on my porch, wearing the concerned mother face, peering into the sidelight to see in. I thought about not answering, but I knew her. If I didn't open the door, she'd call police and tell them I was a danger to myself. I'd watched her do exactly that to a neighbour over a parking dispute. So I opened it and stood in the frame, blocking the way. She shoulder-checked past me anyway, harder than a frail woman should be able to, and stopped dead at the wall of moving boxes. Oh, thank God you're packing. She put a hand to her chest. I was so afraid you'd be stubborn and wait for the sheriff. Mum, what are you doing here? Supervising, she said, running a finger along a box like she was checking for dust. And making sure you don't bring junk. The basement's small. Clothes are fine, but these, she gestured at my books. We've no room for old paper. Donate them for the landlord. I'm not leaving them, and I'm not moving into your basement. She laughed, that tinkly, grating little laugh, and walked into my living room sneering at the walls. God, this is depressing. Why you wasted money on this paint colour, I'll never know. Good thing you're leaving. This place was never really you. She turned around, expecting the slumped shoulders and the nod. Now grab your coat. I need you to run me to the pharmacy. My knee's killing me. Good practice for next week. I crossed my arms. No. She blinked. Excuse me. I'm not driving you anywhere, and I'm not moving in on Saturday. Don't test me, she said, voice dropping. I know you're embarrassed. I know it's hard to admit you failed, but playing hard to get won't change the facts. You've no money. You've no home. You've no home. You've nowhere else to go. I have a very good job, I said, and I own this house. I've owned it for 3 years, and I'm selling it because I'm moving to London." She froze. I watched her try to process it and reject it in the same second because it didn't fit the story she'd written. "London," she repeated, like I'd said the moon. "Don't be absurd. You can't make rent in the suburbs. How would you live in London?" "My company is transferring me. They're paying for the move, and when this house sells, I'll walk away with more money than you've ever seen at once. So no, I won't be dusting your baseboards." Her face cycled through shock, denial, and then pure fury before a strange calm slammed down over it like a mask. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, soft and pitying, shaking her head. "You've had a breakdown, haven't you? London. A transfer. This is a fantasy you've cooked up because you can't face losing your apartment. I'm going to call Dr. Halloran. He's a friend of the family. He'll get you in for an assessment. We can't have you flying off to Europe in the middle of an episode." "Get out," I said. "I'll see you Saturday, dear," she said, opening my own front door. "Don't worry. We'll tell the neighbours you're just confused." She left, and I stood there shaking because I understood exactly what she was about to do. She wasn't going to believe me. She was going to make me the crazy one. She started before her car cleared my street. By Thursday, I'd heard from 3 cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. One, "Hey, your mum told us what you're going through. No shame in getting help. We love you." Another, "Please just listen to your mother. She only wants what's best. Don't run away." She was painting me as unstable, deluded, inventing a glamorous fake job to cover financial ruin. It was a masterclass. If I defended myself, I'd look defensive, which proved her point. If I stayed quiet, her version stood. But her panic gave her away. Why was she fighting this hard? It wasn't about the chores. My mother was lazy, but she was also cheap, and something about the math wasn't adding up. So I did some digging of my own. I still had the login for my parents' shared email from when I'd set up their tablet a couple of Christmases back. I knew it wasn't right. They were currently trying to get me committed, so I decided we were past etiquette. I went straight to the sent folder. 3 weeks back, a thread with a home care agency. Subject, replacement for Carmen. The agency, as discussed, we're unable to place another aide with you. Carmen has filed a formal complaint regarding verbal abuse and unreasonable conditions, and there is an outstanding balance of $3,200 for 2 months of unpaid service. My mother's reply, Carmen was incompetent and a thief, and I won't pay for substandard work. In any case, my daughter is moving home next month to take over full-time, so cancel the contract. My jaw actually dropped. She'd driven off the help, stiffed them on the bill, and cancelled the contract on the assumption that I do the job for free. Then I found a folder marked travel. Inside, a booking confirmation, a 120-day round-the-world cruise, departing in November, a balcony stateroom, the total in Canadian dollars sitting just over $52,000. And it all clicked. They weren't frail. They weren't sick. They were planning to be gone for 4 months on a luxury cruise, and you can't leave a house empty that long without someone to mind it, pay the bills, keep the place from freezing. That was the caretaker role. I wasn't moving in to nurse anyone. I was moving in to be an unpaid property manager so they could drink cocktails off the coast of Portugal. And the rent they assumed I'd pay them, to sleep in my own childhood basement, was meant to cover the last installment on the cruise. I printed all of it. The agency emails, the unpaid invoice, the cruise receipt. My hands were shaking again, but it was a different shake now. The cold, steady fury of a woman realizing she'd been a line item in a budget the whole time. Friday, Yvette called, and her voice was unusually grim. "We have a situation. Your mother found the listing. She just called my office." My stomach dropped. What did she say? She didn't give her name at first. Called the number on the sign pretending to be a concerned neighbor. Told me the tenant, "You, has trashed the place. Water damage you're hiding. A cracked foundation. She said there'd been a grow-op in the basement last year." Yvette's voice went icy. She was trying to scare off buyers so the landlord would evict you and you'd have nowhere to go but home. She actually asked whether the landlord planned to sue the tenant for damages. What did you tell her? I let her finish. Then I said, "Is this Mrs. Caldwell?" She went silent, and I told her, "I'm the listing agent. I've walked this property myself. There's no grow-up and there's no landlord. Your daughter is the sole registered owner. She's listing at 1.49, and we've already got 2 preemptive offers, so she's going to walk away with a very large check." Then I told her that if she called my office again, I'd be speaking to a lawyer about interference with a contract. I sat down. What did she do? Hung up. But she knows now. She knows you have the money and the power, and women like your mother do not take that well. No, I said, looking at the cruise receipt on my desk. She needs that money. She'll try one last thing. The open house is Sunday. Keep it. Pack it full. I'll be there. Sellers usually aren't present for. My parents will be. I'd put money on it. They'll come to make a scene, to shame me in front of strangers. I looked at the stack of paper. And I'm going to let them. Sunday came up clear and gold, the kind of crisp October afternoon agents pray for. The house looked incredible. Yvette had staged it down to a bowl of real apples and a tray of actual baking, not the boxed kind my mother sneered at. I wore a navy dress, not the sweatpants of a defeated daughter. I watched the camera feed on Yvette's tablet as cars filled both sides of the street. "It's a zoo," she said, fussing with a vase. 3 couples already asking about the escalation clause. You could clear 80 over asking. "I don't care about the 80, I said, watching a familiar sedan double park behind a buyer's car. "I care about what's about to walk through that door." My parents got out. My mother was dressed for battle, a severe grey suit, marching up the walk at a speed that put the lie to every story she'd ever told about her hip. My father trailed behind holding a foil-covered casserole, looking like he wished the ground would take him. She shoved through the couples in the front hall without an "excuse me." "Mind your step," she announced loudly to the whole room. "The boards in the hallway are rotten. We haven't had time to fix them." A young couple looked down at their feet in alarm. Yvette stepped forward, all steel and velvet. "Mrs. Caldwell, the inspection's clean. Those are solid oak, refinished last year." My mother ignored her and found me across the room. She didn't look at me like a mother. She looked at me like a sergeant who'd spotted a deserter. "Sweetheart," she cried, rushing over to press a hand to my forehead in front of everyone. "Oh, you're burning up." "I told you the stress was too much." She turned to the buyers, voice pitched for the back row. "I'm so sorry, everyone. My daughter is going through a difficult time. This listing is a mistake. She's not well. We're taking her home for care. The open house is over. Please go." I felt the doubt ripple through the room. That was her gift, sounding so reasonable that reality bent around her. "Dad," I said. I didn't look at my mother. I looked straight at my father by the door, white-knuckling that casserole. "Put it down." "Maybe we just step outside and talk," he mumbled. "No," I said, moving out from under my mother's hand. "We're doing this right here." I turned to the room. "I'm the owner of this house. I'm of completely sound mind. I'm a senior researcher at a financial company, and in 3 weeks I'm transferring to our London office. My mother's lying to you because she wants me to move into her basement and work for her for free." "She's delusional," my mother laughed, high and frantic. "The London job is a fantasy. She's broke." "Am I?" I reached to the mantel and lifted the folder. "Then why does my agent have a verified proof of funds from my bank?" I took a step toward her. The crowd parted like water. "You told the neighbours I was broke. You told them I was a failure, so you could play the rescuer. But that wasn't enough, was it? You needed me desperate, because you fired Carmen." Her face went grey. "I have the emails, Mum." I held up the printout. "The ones where you called the agency, refused to pay the $3,200 you owed them, and told them to cancel because, your words, my daughter is moving home to take over full-time." I looked at my father. Did you know that, Dad? She fired the aide because she'd already decided I'd do it for nothing. My father stared at her. Martha, you told me the agency went under. And here's why she actually needs me, I said, pulling out the second page. The Sun Princess, a 120-day round-the-world cruise, departing November. Balcony stateroom, $52,000. A genuine gasp went through the room. I wasn't imagining it. You can't cover that on your pension, can you? That's why you needed me in the basement. You were going to charge me rent in my own chartered home, and my rent was going to pay off your cruise while I mowed your lawn and scrubbed your floors. My mother was trembling now, looking around for an ally and finding none, because Mrs. Whitford herself had wandered in off the porch and was standing there with her mouth open. You ungrateful little brat, my mother hissed, the mask gone entirely, her face twisting. After everything we did. We raised you. You owe us. You're leaving your parents to rot so you can swan off to Europe. I'm not leaving you to rot, I said, and I kept my voice level, which I think frightened her more than shouting would have. I'm leaving you to live the life you can actually afford. If you want a caretaker, hire one. Pay them. It won't be me. And raising me doesn't entitle you to own me. It never did. Then my father set the casserole down on a staged white ottoman with a dull thud, and he straightened up, and when he spoke his voice was deeper than I'd heard it in years. You booked the world cruise. You told me we were visiting your sister in Florida. It was a surprise, Albert, she snapped. I was handling it. With our daughter's money, you said, by turning her into a servant. She has plenty, my mother shrieked, flinging a hand at the room. Look at this place. She can afford to help us. She's selfish. No, my father said. He looked at me and his eyes were wet. She's not selfish. We are. Sweetheart, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know about Carmen. I didn't know about the cruise. I know, Dad, I said. Get in the car, Albert, my mother commanded, sensing the ground shifting. We're leaving. Clearly she's unwell. No, he said. She went still. Excuse me. I said no. He turned to Yvette. Is the house still for sale? Yvette nodded slowly. It is. Good, because my daughter has earned every cent. He looked back at my mother. I'm not going on the cruise, and I'm not going home with you right now. I'm staying to help her pack. You can't leave me, she said. My hip. Your hip is fine, my father said flatly. You play pickleball Tuesday. I saw the paddle in the trunk. She stood there in the middle of my staged living room, stripped of every lie, surrounded by strangers who now knew precisely who she was. She looked small. Fine, she spat. Fine, be miserable, the both of you. And she stormed out and slammed the door so hard Abaya flinched. There was a beat of total silence. Then Yvette clapped her hands together brightly. Well, as you can see, the seller is highly motivated and the title is clean. Who'd like to see the primary suite? The fallout was swift and, I won't lie to you, deeply satisfying. The house didn't just sell, it set off a frenzy. Yvette had been right about the market and dead right about the drama, because the spectacle made the place a legend on the street rather than a liability. I took an all-cash offer, $80,000 over asking, from a young architect who said he loved the energy of the place, and we closed in 11 days. My mother's standing, meanwhile, collapsed entirely. Mrs. Whitford had witnessed the whole thing, and Mrs. Whitford talked. By Monday night, the Residents' Association, the Garden Club, and her church auxiliary all knew that she'd faked her ailments, stiffed her cleaner, and tried to trap her own daughter into unpaid servitude to fund a secret cruise. She stepped down from the full fare, citing her health, and everyone understood it was because no one would sit next to her. But the real change was my father. He didn't divorce her. They're of a generation that simply doesn't. But he did something better. He quit being her enabler. 3 days before my flight, we had dinner downtown, just the two of us, at a steakhouse he'd always wanted to try. He looked tired but lighter, like he'd finally put down a heavy bag he'd been carrying for decades. She cancelled the cruise, he told me, cutting his steak. Lost the deposit too. She's furious. I'll bet, I said. How's home? Quiet, he said. I hired the agency back. New aid, not Carmen. She wouldn't come. And I told your mother that if she fires this one, I'm getting a condo. I think she believes me this time. He reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was rough and warm. I'm sorry. For years I just wanted peace, so I let her rewrite everything because it was easier than fighting. When I watched you stand in that living room and take on a whole crowd just to be heard, I understood I'd failed you. I should have done it 20 years ago. You're here now, Dad, I said, and I meant it. That's what counts. London, he said, and a real smile crept onto his face. You know, I've always wanted to see the British Museum. There's a guest room with your name on it, I said, a real one, not a basement. He laughed, and it was the best sound I'd heard from him in years. The day I left, the city was grey and the leaves were down. I stood at the gate at Pearson with my boarding pass in one hand and my phone in the other. There was one last text from my mother. I hope you're proud of yourself. The whole street is still whispering. If you want to make this right, you can send a check for the deposit you cost me. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt finished. I didn't reply, and I didn't block her either. I just deleted the thread, the way you'd wipe a counter. I walked down the jet bridge with my carry-on rolling smooth behind me, and I want to be clear, I wasn't running away. I was going towards something. I had my work, my money, my name back, and a guest room waiting for the father who'd finally chosen me. When the plane lifted off and banked over the lake, I looked down one last time at the suburbs that had spent 31 years trying to keep me small, and somewhere down there in a spotless beige house my mother was, I imagine, dusting her own baseboards for the first time in 20 years. When the cart came by, I ordered a glass of champagne. The flight attendant asked if I was celebrating anything. Freedom, I said, and I touched my glass to the little napkin and smiled the whole way up through the clouds. The thing I keep coming back to is that my mother didn't lose because I got lucky. She lost because of choices she made, one quiet decision at a time. Long before that Sunday dinner, she fired Carmen and stiffed her on the bill. She booked a $52,000 cruise she couldn't pay for. She told the whole street a story about me before she ever asked me a single question. Every one of those was a small crack, and when the pressure came, the whole thing split right along the lines she'd carved herself. That's the part nobody warns you about. The people who try to build their lives on top of someone else aren't standing on solid ground. They just haven't been tested yet. And I want to be honest about my own part in it because for years I helped her. I showed up every Sunday. I drove Albert to physio. I let her rewrite what was true because keeping the peace felt cheaper than the fight. I thought that was love. It took me a long time to learn the difference between being good to people and letting people use your goodness as a leash. Real decency isn't doing whatever you're told. It's refusing to lie, refusing to cheat someone out of what they've earned, and being honest even when honesty cost you the porch chair at Sunday dinner. The day I stopped confusing the two was the day I actually grew up. What saved me in the end wasn't anger. It was thinking clearly when everything in me wanted to scream. I didn't argue at that table. I went and read the emails. I checked the market. I called a vet instead of calling my mother back. Being smart isn't about being the cleverest person in the room. It's about looking at what's actually in front of you instead of the story you wish were true, and then doing the unglamorous, careful work, the proof of funds, the printouts, the closing in 11 days, that turns the truth into something nobody can argue with. But knowing the right thing and seeing it clearly still aren't enough on their own. You need the spine to walk out the door with your hand shaking and not turn around. That's the part I'm proudest of. Not the money. The money was just the parachute. The real thing was standing in my own living room in front of a crowd of strangers and a mother who'd called me crazy and not folding. You build that kind of nerve the same way I built that house, slowly, one hard winter at a time, until one day you find it holds your weight. So if you're the fixer in your family, the one who's been quietly paying for everyone else's comfort, hear me. You are allowed to stop. You don't owe anyone your whole life because they raised you. Be honest, think before you react, and find a steel to leave when leaving is the only honest thing left. The ground you stand on after that is yours. Nobody handed it to you and nobody can take it away.